right, Peg, you ready?
I am ready to roll.
Let's do this. Okay, so I'm Matt Carpenter. This is Peg Keough. I'm up here in the Boston area, just north of the city in Salem, Mass. Peg's out in Seattle. We'll introduce ourselves and dive into the content in just a few minutes here, but just some quick housekeeping stuff before we dive in. We're recording this, so everybody's going to get a copy of this presentation, including all the questions and answers. To that point, any questions you have, which we encourage, we love it. We want to make this thing as interactive as possible. We want to answer the questions that are specific to you and your family. Please put them in the Q&A as opposed to the chat, because that way they get transcribed and everybody gets to benefit from that, even those that registered for tonight but weren't able to attend live. And again, as you reference this, tomorrow and in coming days, you'll have that all archived for you. So again, all questions in the Q&A, and Peg and I will be tag teaming those things. You can ask as personal as a question as you have, and remain anonymous as well. So you have that option when you go to pop it in there. So again, we don't care how granular it is. Put it in there, and we will get to it tonight. Or if you can stump us, which I highly doubt, we'll get back to you tomorrow with an answer. And again, you'll get the recording and you'll get the slides as well. The slide deck we go over tonight is going to be minimal for the most part. We're going to be in the technology, which I'll reference in just a second here, and actually in the FAFSA and CSS profile in real time. You'll have some supporting, again, slides and documentation that will accompany our follow-up tomorrow. To that point, if you haven't already, you got a reminder, or you should have, in the Zoom registration or invites to sign up, create an account at mycap.collegeaidpro.com. And Peg, just do me a favor and throw that in the chat if you wouldn't mind. Throw that link, because obviously we're here tonight to talk about the do's and don'ts of these financial aid applications themselves. But if we zoom out for a second, ultimately what we're trying to accomplish is, how do we pay as little as possible for college, right? So, and the next thing that we need to think about once we complete this step of completing financial aid applications is, what are these colleges actually going to cost me? So something that you're able to tell, and you can find out tonight, you can put right in that platform in your College Aid Pro account is what are these schools actually going to cost me? If I get into all 8 colleges that my kid applied to, am I going to get any scholarships? Am I going to get any need-based financial aid? How much? That's something that, again, we'll be able to tell you instantaneously. So in addition to educating you from a higher level tonight, we want you to have specific information for your family at the exact colleges that you're targeting. So again, we're going to weave in some higher level stuff with the mechanics of the FAFSA and financial aid applications as well. So those are the things. Go ahead and set up your account as we're introducing ourselves here. Again, doesn't cost you anything, and it's going to make tonight a little bit more powerful. And again, any questions, pop them in the Q&A, and we will get you taken care of. But Peg, before I take over here, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how we ended up where we are, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, so I like to start with a little story. So you can see my family up on the screen. I have 2 kids. That's when they were seniors in high school, Shannon and Brennan, twins. And one night I was laying in bed and they were downstairs watching TV and just laughing, having a good old time. And I sat up and I realized I was kind of sobbing. And I said to my husband, we're not going to hear this laughter next year when the kids are off in college. And I remember that feeling that I had like it was yesterday. And the reason I'm sharing this is that I know probably a lot of you have a senior in high school based on what we're talking about tonight, or you might have a junior. And so you're really kind of in this space. And I just want to tell you that I get it, and you'll get through it. It's just this kind of perfect storm of emotions, right? You're really excited for your kids. This is what you've been doing for years to get them ready to take this, at least half step to independence, right? But it's a little melancholy because they're starting a new chapter, and for the kids, they're all excited, but at the same time, it's a little scary, right? So I get it, and you will get through it. So basically when my kids hit high school, I did what a lot of you probably did, started thinking like, oh, we got to get our act together. You know, maybe you've been saving for college for a little while, but really, how does this whole thing work? And I realized very quickly that it was much more complicated and crazy compared to when I was a kid. But the other thing I noticed was a lot of my friends and colleagues were not really doing a deep dive into this, and it was causing a lot of stress and a lot of expense that really wasn't necessary. And so at the time, I had about a decade of experience in financial planning. So I kind of had this aha moment that I could couple that with this deep expertise in college financial planning and just really impact families a lot more. And that's what I did. So I started a company in 2014 called Way to the Quad, and we worked with hundreds and hundreds of families through the years. And I've known the CAP team for at least 5 years and used and was lucky enough to beta test the software that they first developed. And it was integral to my practice. And we just, over the years, always talked about partnering in a deeper way. And in September, that happened. So I actually joined the CAP team, which has been a wonderful change. I think it's been a great addition for CAP and been great for me to have a team. And so that's where I am. That's why I do what I do. And that's my story. So how about you, Matt?
Yeah, so I always like Peg. I mean, it sounds like some of you are familiar with Peg and have heard of her before, but I think it's always powerful for me. I can't hear it enough times. And just, I've been guiding families through this process for my entire career, coming up on 20 years now. So I haven't lived it and breathed it in the same way that Peg has, and you all are going through in the moment. But I've done it vicariously tens of thousands of times. So, you know, and so I've been deeply entrenched in this process and been a third party for so many families. So I get it. And you know, I think Peg and I can empathize with those of you that are on, you know, more than most, right? And again, same thing. I would reiterate, like we get it. You're in good hands. Stay engaged with us, and we're going to make sure that you're doing the right things at every step here. And something that even I remember, actually, when my wife, or this is my little team here. So I remember when my wife was even pregnant, which was, you know, 8 years ago now, all my clients were like, savor every second, don't blink, because your daughter's going to, we didn't know, you know, turns out it was my daughter. Your daughter's going to be going off to college tomorrow. Right. And like, I can't believe she just turned 7 last week. And so I've tried to take that advice to heart to the extent that I can, because I know everybody is just trying to give me the best advice possible to say, like, enjoy it. She's going to be 18 tomorrow. Right. And I totally get that. And I try to almost pay that forward in the sense that every single year, and I'll try to do it throughout the year with my clients, I'll say the piece of advice that I get, or we do a survey at the end of every year, and we'll ask our clients, you know, if you could go back to the beginning of the time, the beginning of this process, rather, when you first joined us, the beginning of senior year of high school, what advice would you give yourself now that you're done through with the process? 90% of people say, I would tell myself to not get so caught up in the deadlines and the FAFSA and where are we going to get into school and are we going to get enough financial aid? What loan should I take? How the hell am I going to pay for this? And I just try to, even though that's inevitable, right? I don't want to dismiss how stressful all that stuff is, but I try to tell myself, shake myself. This is the last year that your son, your daughter, whoever's going to be in your house for the, you know, and then they're off on their own. Enjoy it, right? Try to make it, bring some levity to this whole thing that is super stressful, overwhelming, etc. So I don't want to take too much of our valuable time tonight, but hopefully that messaging kind of sets the tone and is important, because I believe in it. Peg believes in it, right? And again, she's been there and done that. And you know, hopefully it's helpful. Okay. So before we get into what we're all here for tonight, which is, again, the FAFSA and the CSS profile and the do's and don'ts, et cetera, I want to do a little bit of a review, and maybe this is new if some of you are engaging with us for the first time, to just revisit, how does this whole thing work? How does financial aid work? You know, why ultimately am I doing the FAFSA and CSS profile? Why is it relevant? So two types of need-based financial, or two types of financial aid that are available. One of them is merit-based aid. We'll kind of end tonight spending a few minutes on that, but it's basically scholarships, right? Discounts that colleges give based on the student's credentials, very little to do with the parents and families' overall financial situation. What's a little bit more complex, the other type of financial aid is called need-based financial aid. And every single college uses the same starting point for determining your eligibility. And that is the cost of attendance minus the EFC. And if there's a difference between those two figures, that's your family's eligibility or potential eligibility for need-based financial aid. So cost of attendance is sticker price, right? I go to Google, how much does Sarah Lawrence College cost? Okay, $85,000, right? The EFC is a dollar amount that gets assigned to your family based on the overall financial profile of your household, income and assets being the biggest drivers, among others that are certainly relevant there. And if your EFC is that dollar amount is less than the sticker price at any given college, that's how much need-based financial aid you may potentially be eligible for, right? And as we're going to find out in a few minutes here, every college is different. Okay, so and if you haven't started experiencing this already, I know some colleges have already sent out at least admissions and merit-based scholarships notifications. Need-based financial aid packages for some schools will be coming shortly. But basically, they're telling you exactly how much you're going to pay. And in most cases, it's not the full sticker price, right? A lot of times we'll talk about the fact that for many families at many colleges, sticker price is irrelevant. But we want to know how much these schools are going to cost us as soon as possible, because that's super important, right? Before we kind of look at some schools side by side here, let's talk about some of the ways, and Peg is going to revisit some of these, so I'm not going to belabor them. But again, what are some of the things that we can get, or some of the things that we can do to have our EFC be as low as it can possibly be, and potentially make us eligible for more need-based financial aid? Number one is we want to make sure that we're reporting assets the right way. Peg's going to get into specifics there, and it tends to be most important on the FAFSA. Another thing we want to make sure is understanding that in most cases, parental assets have less scrutiny placed on them than assets in the student's name, right? So in other words, if we have a $10,000 savings account that is in the student's name, that can move the needle in terms of how much financial aid we're getting. Whereas if it's in the parent's name, it's kind of a negligible difference. So how we report certain assets can be really important. Okay. And another thing that we'll kind of talk about is the fact that for us homeowners, right, if we're a homeowner, a lot of these colleges that generally speaking are private colleges, they think that home equity, the amount of home equity that we have in our home is fair game. So that is something that can be super relevant. We want to know, well, what colleges are those and how much emphasis are they placing? Because again, there's variations here. So to that point, and let me bear with me 1 second while I tee up, because what I want to do for those of you that haven't set up your MyCap account already, I'm going to bring that up right now so you can.
And I had a few questions. So the URL that I put in the chat, that's what you want to click on. And then you just click on get started and that'll get you in.
Yeah. So what this is again, for those of you that haven't set up your account already, that's what Peg was just referencing. You can just go to mycap.collegeaidpro.com and that's in the chat. But for those of you that have, this is kind of your dashboard, right? After you answer, it takes about 2 minutes. You answer about 10 questions, and then you kind of get popped into the platform. Now, during your onboarding process, we only ask you to put one college in there, but here's where you have the opportunity to add more schools once you got in there. And what I did was I put in an average, according to income and assets, an average family of 4 that lives in Massachusetts. And then I put 4 schools in. And the reason why, again, if we're zooming out a little bit before we get into the FAFSA and CSS profile, the reason why those forms are so important is they are what determine our EFCs. And our EFCs is what determines our eligibility or lack thereof for need-based financial aid, right? And to further confuse things, there's actually 3 different EFCs that any given college can use. Okay, most public schools, our UMass Amherst of the world, state schools, use the federal EFC. Most private schools are certainly many, I shouldn't say most, but many private schools use the institutional EFC. That tends to be higher, specifically if you're a homeowner. And then there's the Harvards, the Columbias of the world that use something called the consensus methodology. Okay, that's good to know, but ultimately all we care about, how much are these colleges actually going to cost me, right? And I mentioned just a few minutes ago that for so many families, the sticker price is irrelevant. And again, this is not an anomaly. This is an average family I put in here, according to census data and income and assets, et cetera. And we're seeing that the $80,000 college, Amherst College, is going to be, because again, we don't care about the sticker price. What's my net cost going to be? Well, it's going to be about $29,000 to go to the $80,000 college, which is almost the same price to go to the in-state state school, right? And even though NYU has about the same sticker price, they're way more expensive than Amherst College. Why is that? Well, first of all, and we're not going to drill all the way down tonight because we could spend all night talking about why and going over the statistics, et cetera. And it's all in there. If I click on more info, it will tell me why. But at its kind of surface level, we want to know, what are schools actually going to cost my family, right? And those are some of the first things that we want you to be able to answer tonight. Put in the schools that you're applying to. There's the free version of this platform only allows you to put 3 schools in, but at least put in your top 3 at the very least, so you know what is it going to look like if my kid actually gets in here. So again, I just wanted to kind of set the stage from a higher level before I kick this over to Peg here and we actually get into the applications themselves. We'll kind of wrap tonight and tie it all together and also talk about, for some of you families, you can be as knowledgeable as us on the financial aid applications, and they still might not get any need-based financial aid. So now what? And then maybe why does it still make sense to go through the mechanics of the process? So again, we'll kind of close with that, but I at least wanted to hopefully set the stage from a high level. And again, we'll kind of take a closer look there after Peg guides us through the FAFSA and the CSS profile itself. So Peg, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Okay, so let's start with the FAFSA. So I did a little bit of the logging in. It's Matt was saying before we got on, if I let you sit through the login, you see what it's like. Takes them a while to get in. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of hit the areas. If you haven't submitted yet, I want you to see it, because that'll take some of the stress out. And then we'll talk about if you have submitted and you want to make a correction, how you can do that for both of these forms. So I'm already logged in. If you're doing it for the first time on the login page, you're going to hit first time. But the key thing is you need to have what's called an FSA ID, Federal Student Aid ID, and password. So if you haven't gotten that, you need to go just Google it. And maybe Matt, if you've got the link, you could put it in the chat. It takes a few days to process. So you want to go in and do that right away. You're going to need one for you, whatever parent is submitting it, and one for your child, the student. And when you log into the FAFSA, that's one of the first mistakes that I've seen people make over the years, is the parent logs in with their FSA ID and password. So now you're going to college, right? So you want to make sure that you're logging in under your child's, because think this is their FAFSA. It's not yours, right? Even though you're probably going to pay most of the bill, it's their FAFSA. So you're using your FSA ID to e-sign on the final page. So just keep that in mind. So once you log in with the FSA ID and password, your child, then they have something called a save key. And you create that, and they're just going to ask you for it every time you log in. So I just put that in there. Now, remember, we've gone in and pre-populated this, so you guys don't have to sit here while I'm putting in dummy information. So keep that in mind. So when you go in, you're going to be moving through each one of these tabs, okay? We've got stuff pre-populated, so I'm going to go into it and show you some things by going down here and saying, hey, we're going to enter this section. When you go in, you're going to be actually filling out this section. If you make a correction, this is how you would be going in to make a correction. So on the first section here, the student demographics, I'm not going to go through all the pages to get there, but there's a question in here that says, Do you want to be considered for work study? And I tell everybody, mark yes. Even if you think, oh, I don't know if I want my child to work, it's a big transition, that's all good. Just mark yes, because I've seen through the years that kids have not gotten work study. And when I dig in with the college, they say, well, they didn't mark yes on the FAFSA. So just mark yes to have all your options open. That's the first thing. You're not obligating yourself to anything, and it's need-based aid. So if you don't have need-based eligibility, you're not going to get work study anyways, okay? The other piece, and I know this is near and dear to Matt's heart from hearing his stories, make sure your social security numbers are right. If you are off by what, it's a royal pain in the you-know-what, right? So just be really careful about that and double check it. You're going to be putting in your social security, both parents, if you're married, and the students, you can see right here. So just really take the extra minute to check those and make sure they're correct. Otherwise, it'll create a lot of havoc down the road. The other piece in here, and I'm just gonna quickly click through here and show you, is they ask about your household size. And I just wanna make sure that people understand most of this stuff is pretty cut and dry. This piece I will stop on for a minute. Student selective service. This is only applicable to males if you have a son, right? You don't have to do this. This is one of the changes that came through. So if you click male, it'll say, are you registered? No. Do you want to register? You can just say no. So don't feel like you have to do that. That's it. They didn't take it off, which they should have, and it'll probably be off by next year, basically. But I want to get to the section here really quickly that deals with the household size, because your household size is basically, as you would assume, it's all the kids. If you have 3 kids and you're married, then you're going to have a household size of 5. The other piece, though, is if you have other people. Okay, I didn't see it. So anyways, I'll just talk through it. If you have other people living in your home that you are providing more than half the support for, there will be a question, and definitely list that, because household size does affect the EFC that Matt is talking about. So just keep that in mind. The other question is, they ask how many people in the household are in college. So if you have an older child, don't forget about the older child that's already in college, right? So make sure that you answer that question correctly, because that has a significant effect on the EFC as well. So let's dive in. I'm going to go over here to the parent financials, because this is where we see most of the mistakes that happen. And some of them totally make sense if you're not used to doing this sort of thing. The first thing I want to take a few minutes to talk about is this data retrieval tool, the DRT. What this does is it automatically moves your income information from the IRS into the FAFSA. So my take, I'm not a big fan of the DRT for several reasons. One being, when the data moves in, it says transferred from the IRS. So you don't know if it's correct. 2, if you were going to make a correction, which we're going to talk about, you can't do that if you've used the DRT. So DRT isn't bad if you know you're not eligible for need-based aid. And Matt's going to talk a little bit more about this. Then the DRT, if the data comes over slightly off, who cares, right? If your EFC is 100,000, well, you're not getting any need-based aid from the colleges. So it's really a decision of yours to make. I'm just not a huge fan for a lot of families that could be eligible for need-based aid. Take that for what it is. They have it here, and it's very finicky too. So if it doesn't perfectly match, you might get an error message. Then you just manually enter. You didn't do anything wrong, just move forward.
Let me just add something here, Peg.
Sure.
So most colleges, especially if you're going to be eligible for need-based aid, and sometimes even if you're not, but you want to take advantage of the federal government student loan that you're entitled to regardless of your EFC, if you don't do the data retrieval tool, or it doesn't work, you try to do it and it doesn't work for whatever reason, sometimes just system error, right? It could be to no fault of your own. many of these schools will at least require that you order and submit a tax transcript. Okay, so I popped in the chat. I put in the website, the link where you can go to the IRS and order and download a tax transcript. This is not your standard tax return, the 1040 that most people think. Tax transcript, tax return is the same thing. It's actually not. And to further be a pain, a lot of these colleges want your tax return and your tax transcript. So we always recommend our clients order your tax transcript kind of no matter what, because especially if you applied to enough schools and specifically private schools, you can expect to get this request. So it's just simplifies things if you have it on hand. And again, for most schools, you need the data retrieval tool and/or the tax transcript. So if you order that, you kind of check that box, because if you haven't got that request, you can expect it at some point. And again, I got that link. I just popped that link into the chat.
Yeah, it's just better to get it ahead of time. People tend to get stressed when they get verified, and almost all the time you didn't do anything wrong, you just get verified. It's just part of the process. Okay, so parent financials. The first thing I'm going to tell you is when you're doing this, take a deep breath. They tell you exactly what to put here. So don't overthink it. Okay. So for your AGI, they tell you right here, it's kind of small, but line 11, don't look at other lines and say, oh, but I think it's that. Okay. Just give them what they want. Right. So that's the AGI. Same thing for earnings, right? Most people, it's going to be box 1 of their W-2. If you're a W-2 employee. You might be self-employed. Just read here. If you've got a Schedule 1 and you have things on lines 3 and 6, whatever it says, just put it there. Again, don't create more stress for yourself than you need to. And just remember, whoever you put as parent 1 and 2, you want to make sure you're following along and you're doing that correctly. So that's the earnings page. This is a place where I see people read their tax return and say, I don't want to give line 22. I think it's line 24 because it says total tax. Put line 22. That is the line you need to put there. Okay. Paying taxes actually helps you, actually lowers your EFC. The one time paying more tax is beneficial. So then we get into some other pages, just follow through. And if any of this is applicable to you, the one thing I want to shout out here, and there's going to be a slide on the deck that you get tomorrow, is about rollover. So if you know you've done a rollover, you've moved money from a 401k into an IRA rollover, whatever it is, if you use the data retrieval tool, we've got a really good slide that explains to you how to do that through the DRT. So read through that slide. If you're not using the DRT, if it's a rollover, you exclude the rollover amount because it's not taxable. So don't put that here because that can shoot up your EFC big time if you've done a $200,000 rollover. Okay. So just a shout out to that. If you've done a rollover, you know what I'm talking about, planting that seed there. Also, if you make any pre-tax retirement contribution, so if you make an IRA, traditional IRA contribution, not a Roth, because that's post-tax, but traditional IRA, and you take the tax deductions, not everybody can, right? Then that goes here. And again, very detailed, Schedule 1, line 15. So follow what you got on the form here. And if that's applicable to you, just pop in the numbers. The next page goes through a few things. Again, if it's applicable to you, if we have anybody on here that has older kids, if your child did work study or is in a co-op program, that does not increase your EFC. So make sure you fill that in when they ask, because that income will be pulled out and not be part of the calculation for the student. Another piece of untaxed income that causes some confusion, a lot of people are saving pre-tax in a 401k or 403b. If you, again, look at the directions, W-2 box 12, there's certain letters that will have a dash and an amount. If those are pre-tax and you voluntarily are contributing, which is the typical way that it happens. Most employers don't mandate it. If they do, you don't have to include it. This is where you want to include that.
Sorry, Peg, and I'm sure you're going to say this anyways, but two things here, and I'll give you a second to catch your breath. We're getting a lot of great questions. Now, I said this right at the top, and I know a lot more folks jumped on right at the top, so I'm sure most of you missed this. But for any questions, please put them in the Q&A, not in the chat. And I know that's a pain, right? I would be annoyed if I got that request. But the reason why we have people do that is that they're all transcribed, your questions and the answers, and you can remain anonymous in there if you want. But for folks that don't get to attend tonight, or if you want to reference this material moving forward, they'll all be saved in the Q&A. So again, please, I know it's annoying, but copy and paste your questions if you put them in chat and put them in the Q&A. I'm not ignoring you in the chat, but we have to, it's kind of our deal. We have to answer them in the Q&A. So thank you for being patient around that. And just to reemphasize what Peg said there, because it's, and I know we're going to throw a lot of information at you quickly here. You're going to have literature around this tomorrow when you get the slides that kind of re-emphasizes in print what we're telling you tonight. But untaxed income can really move the needle on your EFC. And for most families, what that means is if you contribute money to a retirement account, they add that back in, right? So if you make $100,000, and that's what, but you contribute $10,000 to your 401k, these colleges basically say, well, you make $110,000, right? Even though you're not taxed on the 110, you're only taxed on the 100, what you take home, right? So you can see where that can move the needle, but it's only a voluntary contribution, and it's only what you put in. So if you choose to participate in a 401k, it would get included here. If your employer matches it, it wouldn't. If you're a teacher that has to contribute towards a pension, or if you're a firefighter that has to contribute towards a pension, that you're not choosing to do that, so it should not be included in here. And again, those are really common mistakes, specifically for those that work in some type of civil service, that again, it makes their EFC jump way up when it shouldn't be done that way. So just wanted to kind of reiterate that. And in general, we say when in doubt, keep it out. And again, the colleges are going to probably in most cases look at your W-2s and make sure you did it right, et cetera. But just wanted to probably a couple times tonight, I'll stop Peg and double down on what she just told you, because again, these are the mistakes that we know get made by a huge amount of folks, and we don't want you making them. So
yeah. And the other one, and they even call it out here, DD is the value of your health insurance plan. That's a no-no. That doesn't go in there. And as Matt said, if you have a great employer match, that is off base, because that's not your, it's money you're getting, but it wasn't your money. So that's the big piece here from the untaxed income. But if any of the other pieces are applicable, obviously you fill those in, but I'm just trying to hit the stuff that's most applicable. Okay, so now we're in assets. This is the area that most people make a mistake if you're going to, and it can be really punitive, right? So they're asking for checking and savings accounts. That's pretty straightforward, but then they ask you the net worth of the parents' investments, and they say include real estate except for your primary home. So wherever you live, the equity in your home, meaning the market value minus your mortgage or mortgages, that's off the table on the FAFSA, not on the CSS where we're going next, but here it's off the table. If you have vacant land or you have a vacation home, the equity in that should be included here. But what is not included here is retirement accounts. So IRAs, Roth IRAs, 403Bs, 401Ks, none of that should be included here. And that's a very common mistake. The other thing that should be included here is your 529. So if you own 529s for your kids, that's your asset. It's very common for people to put it in the kids asset section, which looks exactly like this. I'm not even going to go there because it looks exactly like this, but it does not belong there. And that is assessed at a much higher rate, up to 25%. Versus 5.64 for the parents. So definitely keep in mind, 529s owned by the parents go in this question. 529s owned by grandma, they don't go anywhere, right? Anybody that's not the parents, and if parents are divorced, non-custodial parent owns it, doesn't even go in. It's only the people that are submitting the FAFSA. So those are the biggies. No retirement accounts and 529s for all the kids. not just the student that you're saving for and you're doing the FAFSA for. And this is going to follow the same way on the CSS profile. So that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. If you have a business, and it says it right here, don't include your business if it's a family-owned business and you have less than 100 full-time employees. Don't include the value, and many people fall under that. Okay, so keep that in mind. And the other thing I'll share is, if you're a consultant or something, and God forbid you get hit by a bus, the value of your business might be zero. And don't feel guilty putting zero. That is very common. If you have a lot of inventory and you own office space and you have really expensive machinery, then you have a value to your business. Or if you have a huge chunk of money in an account in your business. But a lot of people, the value of their business is pretty low. And for most people on the FAFSA, it's not even applicable. So don't make the mistake of including your business when you don't need to.
So, and right. So super important point there. I'll say it again. If your employee, if you're a business that has, if you're a business owner that has less than 100 employees, zero is going on here, right? And I just have to imagine, if you're tuning in tonight, you have less than 100 employees, right? So the takeaway is, in short, zero is what should be put in here. In a gray area, and this kind of depends who you ask, but you can make really sound arguments for either side of the fence, are for those of you that are in real estate, whether it's a part of your business or the primary part of your living. You own investment properties, own and manage investment properties, or at least one. It's its own LLC. It has revenue, it has expenses, it's a business. It happens to be real estate. Now, on the FAFSA, it's asking you to include other real estate. There's really no wiggle room or gray area if we're talking about a vacation home and things like this. There's absolutely a gray area if we're talking about a piece of real estate that produces income, has expenses, et cetera, that, again, I think can easily be categorized as a business. So if you call college, you might get a different answer. And I would argue that if you call 10 different colleges, you're going to get differing answers. But for some of you, certainly, it makes sense to include or not include real estate here if it's, again, a real business, right?
Somebody wrote in and said, if it's in an LLC and it's investment rental property, then that, you could easily argue, falls under the business. Family-owned business, you don't have 100 full-time employees, then the value of that real estate, which would be the value of the business, you can leave out. I had another question around assets from Dawn. If it's an UGMA or an UTMA, which you're saying uniform minors account, uniform gift to minors, uniform transfer to minors, that is an asset of the student, of your child. So that is not the same as a 529. I could go into the reasons. They're different types of investment accounts. An UGMA and UTMA, it's a gift to the student. You can't take it back, and it has to be used for the benefit of the student. So there are strategies around that. You can create what's called a custodial 529 and get it out of the student's name. We're not going into that here, but just keep that in mind if that's something that would make sense. That's the answer to that question. So that's a great question. That does fall under the student assets. And then one other question: what happens if the 529 is for more than one of your kids? How much? You should report the value of all of your 529. So if you have 3 529s for 3 kids and 10,000 in each, you're going to be including 30,000 in that question. So that's how that goes. Okay. So there might be a couple others in their map. But
I'll keep banging away, Peg. I'm all over.
Make sure. Yeah, we get through. Okay. So that's the parent assets. Basically, I'm not going to click through all the student financials. Same deal. You can do DRT if you want, the data retrieval tool. The assets, remember, only include the student asset. One thing that can move the needle potentially, how much money is there? If you have a joint account with your child in savings or checking, which is common. I remember I did with my kids, it's half and half, right? So you want to have more of the assets on your side, because as I said earlier, assessed at a much lower rate for the parents than it is for the student. So definitely divide that if you're both in the account registration, right? So that's how it works with assets. You're going to get to this last page up here, sign and submit. That's when you're going to be inputting the parent's FSA ID and password. And you're going to click that you agree to the agreement that they have in there, and you'll be able to submit. The last thing I want to share about the FAFSA is, and I haven't seen it this year, but as of last year, when you hit submit, they give you a nice confirmation page that you can print. I'm a tree hugger. I'm not into wasting and killing trees. Print that page, right? Throw it in your college file. It gives you a confirmation number. It lists all the schools, and it actually tells you your EFC. Very transparent on the federal side, this methodology. So just keep that, right? That's your proof in case a college were to come back and say, hey, you missed our priority deadline. No, I didn't. I did submit it. Here's my proof. So most people are so happy to be done. They just close out that browser and they take off. Just take that extra minute and print that page, okay? So if you need to make a correction to the FAFSA, you can log back in, and at that point, you'll be a returning person, right? Because you've already submitted it, and you can go in, follow the prompts. I can't show you that here, but follow the prompts. There's a prompt in there. Would you like to make a correction? And follow through and change the stuff that you want to change. And again, print out that confirmation. So you can pretty easily do that on the FAFSA. So that's how it works on that piece. So that's the FAFSA. Now let's kick over to the CSS profile, and I'm going to log back in here. So basically, this is College Board, which if your kids have taken AP classes, SAT, PSAT, that's all College Board.
And again, just a reminder for everybody, I know Peg went through that as quick, right? And you guys are doing your best to follow along. And I think she nailed everything that is kind of most important. Oh, did we hit, and sorry if I was busy answering questions, Peg, but just to make sure, did we hit one of the common mistakes about reporting 529s as a children's asset? You hit that, right?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
I got that. Yeah.
The people have been keeping me busy in here, making me earn my money, which is
I know. You can't, when I'm in Q&A, you can't pay attention as well.
That's how I want it. That's how I want it to be. But I got another question that I just want to make sure that I put a pin in, and I promise I would answer it. But once I get back into kind of my cap here, we're going to talk about, do I have to apply for financial aid? What if I know I'm not getting any financial aid? What are the pros and cons of that? Could I be missing out on not applying for merit aid, or not being eligible for merit aid if I don't apply? So I will kind of start there, but mostly just kind of reminding myself, and you can check me there, but go ahead, Dave.
I'll make sure you hit that. Okay. So now let's hop in here. So you just Google CSS profile. You're going to log in with your kids' login credentials. You don't have to go get a special ID like the FAFSA. They took the PSAT, SAT. They're in, just ask them. Most kids are like, oh yeah, I've got my username and password. So that's how you go in. So this is, this form is a little bit longer, a little bit more invasive than the FAFSA. So we're not going to go through this whole form, but I want to just point out some things. The first thing is you're going to see these red asterisks, right? That means that it's required. So when it comes to financial aid forms, you always want to be honest, but less is more, okay? You don't want to overshare. Unless it's something that's really beneficial for you, then go ahead and overshare. But
when in doubt, leave it out. That's
yeah. And the colleges on this piece, they're going to reach out after you submit this form and ask you for everything in the kitchen sink. They're going to ask you for W-2s, 1099s, your tax returns. So they're going to see all this stuff, and they're going to match it to what you put in the form. So just keep that in mind. That doesn't necessarily happen with the FAFSA. You get verified potentially. Like I never got verified with 2 kids. I lucked out, 8 years, I never got verified, but most people do here or there. So this is just your basic demographics page, but I wanted to show, this is under the parent details. When you get down to where they're asking about retirement plans, do not click anything in this question, because the minute you do, it says, what's the value of all these different retirement accounts? And it's none of their business, and it's not a required question. So again, remember, don't overshare. Don't click anything, and you don't have to share. I don't like them to see that. I've asked College Board personally why they do this, because in my mind, psychologically, if you have a nice big 401k, they might be less generous to your family. And it's really, like I said, none of their business. So this will happen for both parents. So that's the first thing, that you definitely don't want to be including that. When you get down into the income section, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, they go through and they're actually giving you the tax return. Again, look here in my example, you see what they've required. So don't feel like you got to fill in all this stuff. They're going to get your tax return. Don't worry about it. I mean, do what you're comfortable with, right? I've had parents that feel really nervous about, but one of my other suggestions I'm going to make in a minute. So if you're losing sleep over not filling everything in, then fill everything in. It's your form, right? We're just trying to give you our 2 cents of what we've seen over the years and what makes this easier. And you're not pulling the wool over their eyes. They're going to see your return. So that's how this piece works. There, you know, if you're divorced, there's some child support questions. Under the housing area, I see people a lot of times, they don't read, because when you click on these boxes, a lot of times you get a nice little help here. So when you're asked for the monthly housing payment, that's just your principal and interest. So don't include your property tax and your homeowner's insurance. If you do, again, they can question it or back it out. It's not the end of the world. Then when we come to parent assets, remember, this is a nice thing. It's pretty similar in these main rules that I talked about already. Pretty similar to the FAFSA. No retirement, current market value of investments, no retirement in there, and include, again, they're going to tell you over here, include the 529s for all your kids. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind on that piece. You notice we're not talking about real estate because they're going to ask you separately about your real estate. If you own real estate, what's the value? Same thing with your business. On the CSS profile, businesses are not off the table. So that's a big difference, as well as your home equity. Those are 2 big differences. And as Matt said earlier, a lot of families have a higher institutional EFC from this form because of their home equity alone. Okay. Then they ask about parent expenses, household summary. That's where you're adding your kids in. This question that I want to highlight, every parent I've ever worked with has always said, how do I answer this question? And it's under the student resources tab for student income. And so what they're doing is they're dialing into who's going to help the student in that school year, not in general, in this, read the question and answer it. Okay. So they're asking, okay, how much can the parents afford? So on this question, a lot of people will say, well, Peg, I have a 529 with 40,000. So should I just put 10,000? That's fine. You can divide it by 4. The main thing in this question is you want to know your EFC. So that's another reason to make sure you're in MyCap and you've got your EFCs dialed in. You want to have a ballpark of your institutional EFC, because the last thing you want to do here is put a number bigger than your EFC, because the colleges will say, oh, we think the Jones family can afford 30, but they put 35. It's now 35,000 is what I mean. 30,000, 35,000. Okay. So just keep that in mind with this question. People are always worried about what to put here. The other question down here at the bottom says, is anybody else going to help? And again, we always want to be honest, right? If grandma has said, come hell or high water, I'm giving Johnny this amount of money for that school year, then for me, you're being honest, you disclose it. But if it's a conversation of we may help out, that's not really a firm commitment. So that's it's a gray area, like Matt says. It's up to you what you want to put there, okay? Because a lot of grandparents or, big brothers of, uncles want to help, whatever that is. They will take that into account if you disclose it. So you want to be honest, but that's what that question is all about. And then when we're getting to the bottom here, student assets, you're going to get the same type of questions. Again, if there's an UGMA or UTMA and it's, you haven't moved it to another type of account, then you've got to disclose that there if your child is a beneficiary of a trust or something. For a lot of kids, they don't have a lot of assets, so it's not going to be a big driver. The last thing I want to chat about is this special circumstances section. So unlike the FAFSA, there's a place where you can share. And both Matt and I counsel parents to say, look, don't share here. This is where I have parents that just really want to share, right? The reason is if you submit this, you get a financial aid award letter, they're giving you some aid, then you come back and say, hey, I need to share that this happened. Like my husband went part-time or got disabled or whatever it is. Can you please recalculate? It's called exercising professional judgment. They do it all the time. If you tell them everything on the form and then you reach out and say, really, this isn't affordable. Did you read what I put on there? And they'll say, yes, we read it and we took it into account. If you don't share, then you've got a little ammo, right? To say, hey, you've got a discussion starter. So that's what we counsel people to do. Again, if that makes you feel really uncomfortable and you want to share and you're not sleeping at night, then go ahead. But most people, when they hear the reasoning, it makes sense. So you want to leave that, blank. And then the other thing I'll just point out is you may see this and you may not. There's supplemental questions. And this is a giant pool of more questions that a given college can say, hey, I want to ask question 1, 9, and 10. And so when you click here, it'll show those questions and it'll say the school that's requiring those answers. So again, here's 2 questions from Cornell because I plugged Cornell in here. Just answer the questions, right? Answer them honestly. The funniest one I've seen is, what is the make and model of all your cars? I think that's Harvard. So they want to make sure you don't have 3 Bentleys on your driveway. And you're saying
there's a bunch of them, but again, for me, and this is where you get some personal opinions here, and I kind of share them, right? I tend to, but it's also, to me, I say, if they're not asterisk, same rule, don't answer. You know.
Yeah.
And
these aren't, right? So that's a good point. You wouldn't necessarily have to answer them. So that's your comfort level. And some of these things, they won't really know unless you answer. And this form is invasive enough. If you've done it, you understand. And if you haven't, you'll see. They don't leave many stones unturned. So that's, that's up to you. I'm not sure if all of these are not required. I haven't really paid attention that closely to that piece, but that's what that is. You're going to submit it and they're going to get you. Before you submit it, you're going to pay. This one isn't free. The FAFSA is the only thing in this process that's free. So it's not hugely expensive. It's $25 for the first school and then $16 for subsequent schools. You can correct the profile one time. If you realize you made a mistake, once you're done and it's submitted and processed, you have your dashboard. And on this dashboard will be a link that says correct my CSS profile. You can do this one time. You can click on it and follow the prompts and make the corrections. You can always go back in and add more schools, right? That's not a mistake. If you just, your child decides to throw another school on the list after maybe looking in CAP, right? And you find another school. That's totally good. You can pop back in. They're happy to take more of your money, honestly, and have you submit the CSS profile even more. But it is nice. They didn't used to let you make corrections. So now you can make a one-time correction. So that's anything else to add in this area around the forms, or do you want to?
I mean, listen, we could, and we're getting a ton of great engagement, and you did an awesome job, Peg, because it's a tall task to try to, in 30-40 minutes, go through all the do's and don'ts.
I know it's a bit overwhelming.
The FAFSA, CSS, et cetera. Again, we're going to have a recording, but let me share my screen for a second if I could here. And we won't stop, guys, or at least I won't, right at 9 Eastern time here. If we go a few minutes over, which, we're in pretty good shape here, we will do that and make sure that we get to your answers. But kind of with that, right, what we do, so part of our I know we're showing off our platform a bunch here tonight, but that's because we love it and we kind of believe in the value that it provides, and it's ongoing access that you have to myself, to Peg, and our team of what we think are the top experts in this little niche industry that we've lived in our entire careers here. But kind of within that, the Academy, we have all this stuff like in your platform. And again, even if you're just in the free version, you have line by line instructions through the FAFSA and the CSS profile with Peg. We have on-demand courses, we have live courses. We're the ones that monitor the community. So if you say, I was at the webinar last night, I forgot to ask about whatever inheritance, here's the deal, you put in the community, it's Peg and myself and our team that are getting back to you. It's not folks that don't have experience and have lived and breathed this every day here. So again, in our thing is here, right? At the end of the day, we're a business, we get that, but we want to make sure that everybody has access to us and is leveraging our expertise, because we've seen too many people make mistakes that just cost themselves too much money. So I promise that I'm going to get to a question, and I will. But another thing that I just want to share quickly, I started this petition a couple months ago. You may or may not have heard some rumblings of these FAFSA changes that are coming up. One of the big ones that is going to be so I don't want to get on my soapbox too bad here, but bad for so many families is that, Peg had twins, right? And if she had, if this rule wasn't in effect when she was putting her kids through college, her whole landscape of everything would have been doubled essentially. In short, what the deal with this new FAFSA rule that technically already got passed but isn't going into place until the year after next, till 2023, is that right now, if I have one kid in college and I have a certain income, I have certain assets, etc., and maybe my EFC is $35,000, let's say, or this is in fact the case for this dummy family that I put in here. But 2 years later, I have a younger sibling in college, but I have the same income, I have the same assets. What happens? Well, right now, the rule works the way that, rationale would tell you it should work. Basically, my EFC is the same, but it's chopped in half evenly between two kids. So, if for example, this family had twins like Peg, these EFCs, and if I change my information here, these EFCs would get chopped in half. That rule is going away. So now these families are going to say, well, you can afford, even though you have two kids in school now, or even though you have twins, you can afford $35,000 per kid. So it's mind-boggling, right? And we're doing everything we can and trying to actually stop this from preventing. How you can help us is I sent the link in the chat, sign that petition, share that petition, help us prevent this. And we're starting to make enough noise. We have almost 60,000 signatures where some decision makers are at least starting to entertain conversations. And I really believe, like, if we're obnoxious enough about this, and I'm happy to be, but I got to get enough signatures that we can prevent it from happening. So hopefully that resonates, especially with some of you that are going to have more than one kid in college at once at some point over these next however many years here. Okay, so as promised, quick question, or one of the questions I have: do I have to complete the financial aid applications if I know I'm not getting any need-based financial aid? I went into MyCap. It told me my EFCs are going to be $120,000 based on my income, assets, etc. You're not getting any need-based financial aid. You don't have to. Okay, there are some colleges, I just happen to put NYU on here, that require financial aid applications to be considered for merit-based eligibility. They're the minority. In most cases, you don't have to. You just have to apply to the school and you're still considered for merit, but they're out there. So if you're someone that says these forms sound horrible, and they are, I don't want to do them, I know I'm not getting financial aid anyways, in most cases, you can still be eligible for merit. Okay. But one thing that we always share, if you do the FAFSA, regardless of your EFC, the student's going to be eligible to borrow up to $27,000 over the course of 4 years. Okay. That is the only loan that a student can get just in their name. They're guaranteed to get it so long as you complete the FAFSA, no matter how low or how high your income and assets are. They don't need a cosigner. They don't need established credit. They're not going to get a bill until 6 months after they graduate from college. We firmly recommend every single one of our clients take it for one of a couple of reasons, but the two extremes are, if you're a family that needs to borrow, this is the best place to start the borrowing process, full stop, end of discussion, right? If you're a family that doesn't need to borrow, doesn't want to borrow, doesn't want their kid to borrow, why do we still make our clients take advantage of this program? Well, take it out. It's just in their name. Do it each year. Pay it off the next day each year. Now your kid graduates from college as a 22-year-old with established credit. So they go to lease their first apartment on their own. You don't have to co-sign on it as the parent. So it's a nice little perk if you have the means to be able to facilitate that. Okay. So again, too, we're not getting need-based aid. Let's talk about merit. So something that again, I get excited when we go to show off this platform here. As we go to search for schools, something called the Advanced School Search, and this is something that's kind of a paid part of the platform. But if you decide to do that, you could search for schools. Whoever asked that question, you could just say, "Go show me schools that are within 200 miles of my house," and I want to see. I know my kid only likes smaller schools, and they're really focused on majoring in business. And I just want you to rank these schools. Like I know we're not going to be eligible for merit need-based aid, so just rank them based on who's going to give my kid the most scholarship money. Right now, this is a Massachusetts family, so maybe you said, okay, well, that's interesting. I've never really heard of Wheaton College, but they're going to give a $40,000 scholarship. Let's check them out. Right? Or if we are eligible for need-based aid, you can just sort based on who's going to give me the most financial aid. Well, I don't think my kid can get into MIT, but Babson's interesting. Maybe I'll add them to the list. So this is kind of, again, regardless of what family you are, we want to make sure that you can instantly find out not just how much schools are going to cost you, but what are other schools that are going to be most cost effective, and can we actually afford them, right? We have this really great part of the platform that tells you not just what are they going to cost, but can your family afford them? And again, we don't have enough time tonight to kind of get into how we arrived there. You'll somewhat have to take my word for it to go try it out. And then it's almost private scholarship search season. We have what we consider to be the most robust technology when it comes to private scholarships. And the next thing we're going to talk about, we got one of these questions, is what if the specific question was, what if we don't get we had a great year in 2020, which for you class 2022 families, your financial aid offers are going to be based on 2020, but 2021 stunk and 2022 doesn't look good. What do we do then? We have to appeal. We have to negotiate for more. How do we do that? The next webinar that Peg and I have, and as a matter of fact, we were working on a date today that we didn't finalize, will be end of January, early February, something around then. You will hear from us. And that's what we're going to say. That's in this technology. You can upload your offers, and then we're going to help you figure out how do we negotiate for more money. Okay, so I don't want to keep folks for too much longer here. The last thing that I do want to show you before we cut out. So again, you are going to get a follow-up from us tomorrow, recording slides. Everybody hopefully is going to take advantage, at least for the free component of the technology, but you'll also have an offer where if you want to spend an hour with Peg, right, a 1 hour strategy session. I mean, I've always loved what Peg kind of leads with, like, what's keeping you up at night? Take an hour. You want to go line by line through the financial aid applications. You want to talk about what mistakes you made. You want to make sure that you've got a good offer. You want to get prepped for how to go through this appeal negotiating process. You want to talk about your next kid. You want to start thinking about what loans are going to be best for your family, when to disperse what funds. There's a lot of strategy when it comes to, we got some questions here when it comes to dispersing grandparent 529s. What are the do's and don'ts there? When should we use what resources? So this, I think, this isn't going to be here forever in terms of having the ability to, book an hour with Peg here, but in addition, you get an hour of the full technology, all the bells and whistles, right? Like I said, the free component of the platform, I think, is awesome, but it's somewhat limited. You only can put 3 schools in there. It doesn't have the advanced search or the private scholarship search engine, but if you decide to book an hour with Peg, and that's right on the same link that you have, and we'll walk you through it again tomorrow. You get the platform for a year, as well as booking an hour at your convenience. Another really important thing that I want to make sure that we mention, we try to walk the walk as much as we can in terms of our mission, right? Making this an affordable process for everybody, regardless of your family's resources or kind of wherewithal and how to navigate this process, right? If you're a family that says, I love this platform, so if the paid version of the platform is either $14.99 a month, or for a year it's $149, right? I know, and we've experienced this, a lot of families would love to take advantage of that, but they can't afford $14.99 a month. They can't afford $149 for the year, just send us an email and we'll give you the platform for free. Right? It's not going to include the 1 hour session with Peg, but we will give you the bells and whistles of the platform. We don't verify it or anything like that. You just have to either through the chat in the MyCap platform, go on there and send through the chat and let us know that you would love to have the full access, but you can't afford the price. We will make sure that you have that. And please share if there's anybody that you can think of that aren't on here tonight that you know might benefit from that, you send them our way, and we will make sure that we will deliver on that, and we will do so with pleasure. So
can I just hop in for a minute, Matt? So there's one question. Somebody's asking about ways to quote shelter assets, and I don't even like to put this in writing because it's not something that I ever really, in how many years have ever recommended. But the answer to your question is that on the FAFSA, cash value life insurance and non-qualified annuities are not asked about. But I'm following that answer with, I am not recommending you do that. And I would be very careful if you find professionals that are offering that as a solution to lower your EFC. I'm not disparaging those people. I'm just telling you to do your due diligence and make sure if you're going to buy an insurance product or an annuity, that it is something that makes sense in your overall financial plan. And it's not just a knee-jerk reaction to get assets off of the FAFSA. And it won't help with the CSS because they ask for annuities. So the cash value life insurance is the only one. And that, unfortunately, there's a group of professionals out there that's how they make money, is finding people that have that sort of money and saying, hey, take that 200,000 and put it in this product. I've been in this industry for years. These products are commission-based. They can have big expenses. And again, it has to make sense in your overall plan. But that is an answer to your question. I just wanted to make sure that I answered that. And then Matt, there's one last question that is talking about MyCap versus College Board. So I think that would be good to address, and then we can wrap up here. Do you see it there?
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, in short, we haven't found a more accurate net price calculator on the planet with a lot of consistency. And again, when we are more accurate than the college's net price calculators that they have on their websites. So, and we're happy to have that, have that competition, I guess, with anybody. So yeah, you're going to get some variation, but this thing has been live, so to speak, for 3 years now. So we've had tens of thousands of actual financial aid award letters where we've had to say, how was the actual award compared to what you all predicted here? And it's very rare that we have egg on our face. There's a lot of subjective elements in this process. So we don't ever expect to be perfect. And there's certain scenarios that are more likely to be off, right? But in short, I don't know of a more accurate net price calculator or college cost projector on planet Earth. So, and I could say that with a lot of confidence. But it looks like, Peg, we did pretty good. I mean, we went 10 minutes over here, but it looks like most folks hung on with us. We hope you learned a fair amount tonight. I know it's a lot of information coming at you fast, but that's kind of the deal with this process, right? It's kind of what we have to do. Again, however you stay engaged with us, we encourage it, whether you're on the platform or not, post in the community, kind of follow along with us, because again, we're trying to get better and better with doing things like this that we think are very timely, right? So the next thing that we're going to spend an hour plus on is, okay, we got our offers. Now what? How do we go back and get more money? How do we appeal and negotiate more financial aid? And we'll do that a few times, because there's kind of a couple of times that happens. First with our early acceptances, and then with our regular acceptances. And we'll make sure we spend some time during each of those time periods. So
yeah, we're trying to support you on this whole journey. So if you've got a senior, you're not done yet. Even after the financial aid forms are submitted, you're not done yet. You got a little bit more stuff to do. So we're here.
We're doing what we can. So Great job, Peg. Happy holidays, everybody. We will see you after the new year. Enjoy the kids, right? Celebrate the small victories here, and we hope to be in front of you soon enough.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Happy holidays.
Bye, everybody.